Aimee Lee is an artist, writer, and papermaker based in Cleveland, Ohio. Handmade paper and her Korean lineage stand at the heart of her practice, which expands outward to include fiber and book arts, installation, and performance. Lee uses and preserves traditional techniques from processing fibers and dyes to creating baskets and garments. Her work engages and elevates concepts around craft, utility, and domestic work. Today, let's look at two of Lee's artist books that speak directly to language and generational inheritance. Vocabulary Lessons addresses Lee's experience with her Korean language skills. Born in the US to Korean immigrant parents, Lee is a heritage speaker, someone who learns a language informally at home, but grows up with a different dominant language at school and society around them. As she notes in the colophon for this book, staying bilingual requires constant vigilance. The 5 pages of this intimate book are woven with threads spun from hanji, handmade by Lee. Hanji is a type of Korean paper made from the inner bark of mulberry. Known for its strength, durability, and elegance, hanji has been made in Korea for many centuries. Lee's research and creative practices are concerned with maintaining and preserving hand skills as a means of survival, art, and community. In Vocabulary Lessons, she also addresses developing and preserving her facility with the Korean language. The recto sides present Lee's first-person narrative. These strips of text are woven in. Securely fastened, they are part of the fabric of the pages. On the verso side of this spread, Lee attached 2 words in English and Korean. Tucked into the warp threads of the weave, they appear a little more tenuous. It doesn't look like it would be difficult to pull the word out. These words and translations come from a list that Lee wanted to remember while on a Fulbright Fellowship in Korea in 2021. As I read them, I consider each word's relation to the others, as well as the prose. Lee wrote the text for Vocabulary Lessons in a moment when she was feeling inadequate about her language skills. While her narrative is affixed in roughly the same location on each spread, the individual vocabulary words are attached in different spots, creating variation and energy. On this page in particular, the words are tightly aligned, and I sense Lee's diligence, focused efforts, and sensitivity to the challenges of weaving together her heritage language and culture. In the colophon, Lee noted that each woven page provides structure, the context with which I approach lifelong language study. The different thicknesses of the threads make me think of the varying levels at which one knows a language. We may know a lot of words in one semantic field, such as words related to our work or field of study, while knowing very few words pertaining to another field. Because the weave is loose and open, it stretches a little as I handle the book. This subtle movement gently reflects the expansions and contractions over a lifetime of maintaining a heritage language. Lee's narrative has crescendoed to this spread. Suddenly presented with all of these words filling the page, I am overwhelmed. But when I read each one, I'm calmed by these words, connecting Lee to her craft, her heritage, and her purpose. Vocabulary Lessons ends on this positive, an acceptance of the difficulty of communicating and maintaining language outside of the dominant one where you live. It is not easy, but with each new word woven in, the fabric of communication gets tighter and stronger. In Pelagic Inheritance, Lee investigates how connections and traumas can be embedded into successive generations. The word pelagic refers to living or occurring in open water or the ocean, away from land. This background paper, a persimmon-coated hanji, is thick and heavily textured. The angular shapes cut into the blue paper create a body-like form hanging below the solid surface. They stir a sense of foreboding and unease. The subtle detail of the torn edge on the right side of this strip of paper adds inconclusive tension. The central trauma around which Lee's book develops is an incident when her mother and grandmother were washing clothes in a boat. While the story revolves around her mother, Lee draws us further back in time and across the spectrum of paternal and maternal ancestors. This rubbing comes from Lee's great-grandmother's grave. The characters shown are for the word daughter and then the names of that ancestor's 2 daughters. Lee brings us into the traumatic event through carefully chosen materials and our own actions. As we turn this soft, smaller piece of paper, we are like Lee's mother as a child, reaching into the water to retrieve a dropped white garment. Her mother fell off the boat. The Suminagashi marbling now surrounding the text emphasizes the danger of the water. I can make out some words on this indigo-dyed paper weaving, but the tight weave keeps this text out of our grasp. This object suggests constriction and entanglement. Lee restricts our access to content and details, perhaps in the same way that she was barred from information that nevertheless affected her life. Pelagic Inheritance moves across time without warning. These texts give a wider perspective of connection and generational throughline, regardless of whether we really understand or appreciate the ways in which we are bound together. These 3 distinct elements floating in parallel include some of the many traditional paper, fiber, and dyeing techniques Lee researches and practices. They remind me of boats seen from above, floating untethered, but moving together. The next page interrupts the flow of reading. The text shifts 90 degrees. Lee notes a thread of papermaking connects her to her great aunt. But we're quickly back to the moment when Lee's mother fell in the water as a child, pulled out and screamed at by her mother. When I turn the book to read the text, I see these events as layers above and below the surface of the water. I consider how Lee is connected to the women before her in some obvious ways, and others deeper and internal. In a frugal and ethical approach to making, Lee regularly recycles materials from past artworks into new pieces. Many of the materials in Pelagic Inheritance come from studio remnants. For example, this black and white paper was previously a hanji dress Lee made. The color and angles create movement and anxiety that I can visually connect with falling into water, while the paper's provenance remains in the world of garments. It was, we must remember, a piece of clothing that her mother reached for before she fell out of the boat. Lee establishes a through line in the development of her craft and artwork, as well as her family. Everything moves forward, connected and intertwined. When I asked Lee about this paper dress, she told me, "In this book, I wanted the dress to show up when my mother goes underwater for whatever laundry fell off the boat. I wanted a silent sense of something she was grasping for." We find blue paper against the brown persimmon dyed hanji, just as we did in the beginning of the book, but now the shape recalls a swimming pool. We are ferried from the childhood moment that catalyzed her mother's fear of water to the intense impacts it had on Lee and her siblings. This swatch of material looks like it could be moving in water, but the color and irregular edges communicate fear or apprehension. It is far from calm. Set against simple stitches running the length of these pages, the final text in the book firmly reinforces that trauma moves between bodies and generations, but that there is the possibility for growth and healing, however incremental. Vocabulary lessons in Pelagic Inheritance are intimate examinations of Lee's experiences with her heritage, language, and generational trauma. Drawing from her extensive knowledge of how to make and manipulate handmade paper, these books exemplify Lee's skills at uniting materials and processes to examine and communicate complex ideas and emotions.